The Council, a group of the most powerful alien leaders in the galaxy, had always looked at humanity with a sense of superiority. They were old, wise, and technologically advanced. For centuries, they ruled over countless planets, watching species rise and fall, yet humans remained a curiosity to them. They saw humans as an unpredictable species, full of emotion and passion, but too fragile and primitive to ever be a real threat. To the Council, humanity was just another species to control. They had watched humans struggle and fight among themselves, their wars and disasters always weakening them, making them seem like an easy target for domination. In the grand scheme of things, the Council believed that humans could never stand up to them. They had the technology, the armies, and the experience. What could a species like humanity possibly do against them? Yet, deep within the Council's massive headquarters, a quiet shift was happening. No one saw it coming. The Council's spies on Earth had been reporting strange things. There were whispers of a new human technology, one that could change everything. But this news was buried under layers of bureaucracy and dismissed by most of the Council as another wild human invention. They had seen countless stories of human advancements before, but nothing that truly posed a threat. In the Grand Council chambers, the leaders sat in a circle, discussing matters of galactic trade and power. The room was enormous, its walls adorned with holographic projections of distant planets, each spinning slowly in space. The light was dim, with only the glow of screens illuminating the faces of the Council members. These beings were ancient, with long lifespans that spanned millennia. Their eyes were cold and calculating, their expressions rarely changing. A young advisor, named Zorath, nervously stepped forward. He was the newest member of the Council, still proving himself to the others. He cleared his throat and spoke up. "Council," Zorath began, his voice trembling slightly, "I have received troubling reports from our agents on Earth. The humans, they may have discovered something powerful." The other members of the Council barely glanced in his direction. One of the older members, known as Theron, chuckled softly. "Another human invention, Zorath. How many times have we heard that story? They build their little ships and weapons, but they are nothing compared to our technology. I suggest you focus on more pressing matters." Zorath hesitated but pressed on. "It's not just a weapon, sir. This could be something far more dangerous. They are developing a new form of energy, a power unlike anything we've seen." The room fell silent. The Council members exchanged looks, their interest now piqued. Yet, despite their curiosity, the majority of them remained unconvinced. "Do you mean to tell me," said a voice from the far corner of the room, "that a species who still fights among themselves has somehow found a way to surpass our technology? Preposterous." But Zorath was persistent. "They've built a weapon that uses energy unlike anything we've encountered. And it's not just their weapons. They've begun to unite in ways we haven't seen before. The humans, they're evolving. They're becoming something new." Theron scoffed. "We have seen humans unite before. They fight in wars, they create alliances, but none of it lasts. Their nature is weak, and they will never be able to stand against the might of the Council." Zorath's heart raced. He could feel the weight of the room's skepticism, but something in him told him to keep pushing. He knew he couldn't let this go unnoticed. "I understand your doubt, but I believe we must take this seriously. If they have unlocked such power, they could be a threat to us." Theron raised an eyebrow. "A threat? A human threat? You are not seriously suggesting that?" Zorath stepped back, his mind racing. The words of his mentor echoed in his mind. Never ignore a threat, no matter how small it seems. Zorath had learned that lesson well, but he also knew it was dangerous to challenge the Council's wisdom directly. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had changed, and the Council was blind to it. The conversation drifted away from the human issue, as it always did. The Council members had already made up their minds. Humans were no more than a curiosity, a primitive species that could be easily controlled. And with that, The meeting continued. But outside the walls of the Council's headquarters, on distant Earth, things were changing. In secret laboratories and underground bunkers, humanity was awakening to a power that would soon make them something the galaxy had never seen before, something the Council was not ready for. The calm before the storm was settling over the galaxy, and the Council had no idea that their greatest mistake was just around the corner. As they laughed off Zorath's warnings, humanity was quietly preparing for something that would change the balance of power forever. Little did the Council know, their greatest threat wasn't a weapon or an army. It was the anger of humanity, and the day they stopped being nice was coming soon. The storm was coming, and the Council would not be ready for what it would bring. The sun was setting on the Council's home planet, casting an orange glow across the sky as the leaders gathered for another routine meeting. The planet, a world of vast cities and towering structures, hummed with the energy of a highly advanced civilization. Yet beneath its sleek surface, something had begun to stir, something that no one could have predicted. As the Council members took their seats in the Grand Hall, the usual quiet chatter filled the room. They were used to discussing trade agreements, planetary alliances, and the occasional insignificant rebellion from less developed species. But today, there was an air of uncertainty, one that hadn't been present before. It was a subtle shift, but noticeable to those who paid attention. Zorath, the youngest member of the Council, stood by the large communication screen, watching a live feed from Earth. His mind was heavy with the reports he had received. It was becoming clearer that humanity was changing in ways the Council had never expected. There had been whispers of a new movement, a shift in human unity, in their strength, and in their technology. But still, he couldn't convince the others to take it seriously. "You've brought us here to discuss Earth again, Zorath." Theron's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. The older Council member was known for his impatience, and it was clear he wasn't interested in hearing more about humans. "We've heard your warnings before. I suggest you save us all the time and stop repeating yourself." Zorath bit his lip, feeling the weight of the room's skepticism, but he couldn't give up now. "This is different, Theron," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "What's happening on Earth is more than just human conflict. There's something happening on a global scale. It's as if they're waking up." Theron raised an eyebrow. "Waking up? You expect us to believe that?" Zorath nodded, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Look for yourself. It's not just one isolated event. Reports are flooding in from all over their planet. Human nations, once divided, are now coming together. They've discovered new forms of energy, new weapons, and they're organizing on a scale we haven't seen before." The Council members exchanged glances, some rolling their eyes, others fidgeting in their seats. They had grown accustomed to human uprisings, small-scale conflicts that could be easily extinguished. But what Zorath was describing was different. It was as though humans were preparing for something, and that something was becoming too dangerous to ignore. The communication feed shifted, showing footage of a human fleet, a mix of old and new ships, landing on a distant, remote colony the Council had been overseeing. At first, it seemed like just another diplomatic mission, but something felt off. The humans weren't acting like their usual disorganized selves. They moved with purpose, their movements coordinated, almost military in nature. "What are they doing?" another Council member asked, leaning forward to study the screen more closely. "They're securing the colony," Zorath replied, his voice low. "And not just securing it. They're taking control. Their forces are setting up defensive positions, and their technology is unlike anything we've seen before. It's almost as if they've been preparing for this moment." The room fell silent as the Council members absorbed the gravity of the situation. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the communication devices. Zorath could feel the tension in the air, and he knew that the Council was starting to realize the threat humanity posed was not just hypothetical. It was real. "But why now?" Theron asked, breaking the silence. "Why would they suddenly decide to act?" They've been quiet for centuries. That's exactly what I don't understand, Zorath admitted. It's as if they've been biding their time, waiting for something. But I can't figure out what triggered it. All I know is that they're no longer the same species we've seen before. They've changed. The council members began to murmur amongst themselves, some in disbelief, others in growing concern. Zorath knew that this was their moment to decide whether to take action, or to dismiss him as just another paranoid advisor. His words hung in the air, and for the first time, the weight of humanity's potential seemed too heavy for the council to ignore. One of the older members, Krallis, spoke up, his voice calm but firm. We've seen species rise and fall before. We've dealt with countless challenges. If humans want to play at being a threat, let them. They'll soon learn their place. Zorath felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He knew this wasn't a matter of playing games. The humans had something the council couldn't understand, something that could change everything. But would they listen? Or would they underestimate humanity, as they always had before? I fear they won't just learn their place, Zorath said, his voice growing more urgent. They've been preparing, and soon they'll show us exactly what they're capable of. If we don't act now, we might find ourselves facing a human power we're not ready for. The silence in the room was deafening as the council considered his words. Zorath couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was already on its way, and when it came, it would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The tension in the council's chambers had reached a boiling point. For hours, they had discussed the strange reports from Earth, but the more they spoke, the more uncertain they became. Zorath had warned them again and again, but the council's skepticism remained. Yet, deep down, each member could feel the shift, the quiet stirrings of something that they had overlooked for far too long. While the council remained embroiled in debate, something incredible was happening on Earth. Across the planet, humanity had begun to unite in ways that were previously unimaginable. Nations that had long been divided by old conflicts, borders, and cultural differences were setting aside their rivalries. It was as if an unseen force had compelled them to move as one. In the streets of major cities, people marched together, side by side. It wasn't the kind of march one would expect for a protest or revolution. No, this was something different, something more organized, more disciplined. It was as if they were preparing for something much bigger than just a mere demonstration. Humanity's new unity wasn't just political. Their technology had advanced at an unprecedented rate. For years, they had been known for their passion and creativity, but now they were harnessing their full potential. It was as if they had unlocked a hidden strength, one that no one, not even the Council, had anticipated. In secret labs across Earth, humans were working tirelessly to refine this new technology that, when revealed, would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about them. In the shadowy halls of the Council, whispers began to circulate. Zorath had been right about one thing. Humanity was changing. But what they didn't know was that the change wasn't just in the humans' technology. It was in their spirit. They had always been a species defined by their emotions, their passion, their anger, their love, and their hatred. But now, something different was stirring within them. The spark of unity was slowly transforming into something greater. Zorath had just returned from his meeting when a new report came in. This time, the news was even more unsettling. The humans had activated a new energy source, one that had the potential to disrupt the very balance of power in the galaxy. It wasn't just a new form of energy. It was an energy that seemed to respond directly to human will. The human ability to adapt and evolve had always been their strength, but now it appeared that their power was beyond anything the Council had imagined. Zorath couldn't believe his eyes when he saw the footage. The energy field appeared to glow with an intensity that rivaled the stars themselves. It pulsed in rhythm with the heartbeat of the humans, as though they had tapped into something greater than just raw power. It was as if the energy was alive, connected to the very essence of humanity. The more he stared at the footage, the more he realized that this was not just about technology. It was about the spirit of the humans themselves. There was something deeply unsettling about it. The Council had seen powerful civilizations before, but they had never encountered a species whose power was so deeply intertwined with their emotions, their very essence. This energy wasn't just a tool, it was an extension of who the humans were. It was as though the energy itself was a reflection of their will to survive, their will to protect their world, and their will to rise above their past struggles. But there was something else, something Zorath couldn't quite grasp. There was a quiet fury in the way the humans were wielding their new power. It wasn't reckless or wild, but it was certainly not the calm, controlled power the Council was used to seeing in other species. There was something raw, untamed, and unpredictable about it. As Zorath sat in the Council chambers, staring at the screen, a sudden realization hit him. The Council had underestimated humanity, not just in terms of their technology, but in terms of their spirit. Humans had always been known for their resilience, their ability to overcome insurmountable odds. But now, it seemed, they had unlocked something far beyond mere survival. They had found a new purpose, a new strength, and with that strength came a new determination. Zorath tried to share his thoughts with the Council, but his voice seemed to fall on deaf ears. The Council members were still dismissing the reports, still too blinded by their arrogance to see the danger. But Zorath knew better. The storm was coming, and it was being driven by something far more powerful than technology. It was being driven by the heart of humanity. For the first time, Zorath felt a deep sense of dread. He had always believed in the Council's wisdom, in their centuries of experience, but now he feared they had made a terrible mistake. Humanity had the potential to reshape the entire galaxy, and the Council was doing nothing to stop it. Worse, they were underestimating just how far the humans were willing to go to protect what was theirs. The new energy humans had unlocked was not just a tool, it was a force that could reshape the very fabric of the galaxy. And as the humans continued to experiment with it, the Council had no idea just how close they were to unleashing something that could change the balance of power forever. Zorath could feel it now, deep in his bones. The impending clash was inevitable, and humanity's strength would be the deciding factor. The Council had grown restless. The reports from Earth were becoming more frequent, more urgent, and yet, no matter how many times Zorath pleaded with them, they continued to dismiss the gravity of the situation. It was as though the entire galaxy had grown complacent in its power, certain that no species could rise up to challenge the established order. But Zorath could sense something in the air, something shifting. On Earth, the unity among the humans continued to strengthen. It was no longer just a matter of their collective will. They were coming together in ways that no one could have predicted. From the deserts to the jungles, from the mountains to the oceans, there was a newfound sense of purpose. The humans, it seemed, were no longer focused on their past divisions. Their ancient conflicts, which had once been the source of endless wars, were now being put aside for something greater. This unity among the humans was reflected not just in their actions, but in the technology they had developed. The energy that Zorath had seen was growing, but it wasn't just the energy that was unusual. It was the way the humans were using it. It was almost as though they had learned to communicate with the very force they had unlocked. Their machines, their weapons, and even their cities seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the energy. It was as though the humans had become one with their creation. But the most disturbing part was how quickly they had adapted. What had once been small, experimental technology had grown into something far more powerful. It wasn't just that they had learned to harness new energy. It was that they had learned to control it in ways that no one thought possible. Their ships, once crude and outdated, were now sleek and efficient, capable of traveling across the galaxy with ease. Their cities, once mere collections of buildings, now stood as shining beacons of what humanity had become. Zorath had always admired the ingenuity of humans, but now it seemed as though they had surpassed even his expectations. The Council had underestimated them, and now they were on the brink of facing something far more dangerous than any enemy they had encountered. The humans were not just rising. They were evolving, and they were doing so at an exponential rate. What had once been a handful of nations now appeared to be a single, unified global force. Their power wasn't just in their machines, it was in their unity, in their collective strength. They had learned to put aside their differences for the greater good, and that, more than anything, was what made them so dangerous. Zorath couldn't help but wonder what had caused this sudden shift. What had driven humanity to change so drastically, so quickly? He had spent countless hours analyzing their history, their culture, and their patterns of behavior, but nothing in their past seemed to explain this new force that was emerging. It was as if something had triggered their transformation, something beyond mere technological advancement. There was a quiet intensity in their eyes, a sense of purpose that Zorath hadn't seen before. They were no longer the fragmented species that had once fought among themselves for dominance. Now they had a single goal: to protect their world, to protect each other, and to ensure that nothing would stand in their way. Zorath knew that the Council was still blind to what was happening. Despite all the evidence, despite the growing reports, they refused to acknowledge the threat that humanity posed. They saw humans as a fleeting species, one that could be easily dismissed. But Zorath knew that they had miscalculated. The shift in humanity was not just about their newfound strength. It was about something deeper, something rooted in their very nature. Humans had always been resilient, but now that resilience had taken on a new form. It was as though they had tapped into an inner wellspring of power, a power that came not from their machines, but from themselves. Zorath sat in the council chamber, his thoughts racing. He knew that the time for words was running out. The council had failed to act, and humanity was already several steps ahead. The reports from Earth were becoming more alarming by the day. The energy they had unlocked was not just growing, it was spreading. What had once been confined to a few laboratories and research facilities was now being applied on a global scale. The humans were no longer content to keep their discoveries to themselves. They were ready to share them with the rest of the galaxy. As the Council continued to debate the issue, Zorath couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. He could already see the signs. Humanity was ready for something greater. They had reached a tipping point, and if the Council didn't act soon, they would find themselves facing an unstoppable force. The humans had always been a force to be reckoned with, but now they had become something else entirely. They were no longer just a species to be studied and observed. They were a force of nature, and the Council's failure to understand that could be their undoing. Zorath stood up, his voice firm. "We must act now. If we don't, it will be too late." But the Council was still not ready to listen. They continued to dismiss his warnings, confident in their own strength. Yet, Zorath knew the truth. Humanity was no longer the weak species they had once thought them to be, and the consequences of underestimating them would be dire. As he left the council chambers, Zorath couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to witness a new chapter in its history, one where humanity, once thought of as fragile and fleeting, would rise to challenge the very fabric of power itself, and nothing, not even the mighty council, could stand in their way. The events that were unfolding on Earth were now becoming impossible to ignore. Across the galaxy, the council had begun to hear rumors that something had changed on Earth, something profound. For years, humans had been seen as a species of uncertainty. Their strength was often underestimated, their potential hidden beneath layers of past mistakes and failures. Yet now the whispers were beginning to grow louder. Those who had dismissed the humans' progress, their unity, and their strength were starting to question their assumptions. The day the energy waves from Earth reached the farthest corners of the galaxy was the day the Council knew they had lost control. The signal was like a ripple in the fabric of space, stretching out from the heart of humanity's world and leaving a lasting mark on the galaxy. It was as though Earth had awakened from a long slumber, and with this awakening came a power that no one had predicted. The humans' energy source, this force that had once seemed like a simple curiosity, was now far more than just a technological breakthrough. It was a symbol of everything humanity had become, a species that, despite all odds, had learned to harness their power and to unite in ways no one had ever thought possible. And now, that power was rippling outward, slowly but surely. On Earth, humanity's leaders knew they were at a crossroads. What had begun as a response to their own internal struggles had now become a call to the rest of the universe. The energy they had unlocked was no longer just a tool. It was the manifestation of their collective strength. It was a new era, one that would redefine not only Earth's future, but the future of every civilization in the galaxy. In every corner of the world, humans were now united under a common cause. They had set aside their old divisions, their ancient conflicts, and had chosen to come together for the greater good. This collective strength was reflected not just in their actions, but in the way they viewed themselves. For the first time, they saw themselves not as isolated individuals or warring factions, but as a single powerful force, one that could stand on equal footing with the other civilizations of the galaxy. Across the globe, cities that had once been divided by war and distrust now thrived in harmony. New forms of communication, powered by the newfound energy, connected people in ways that had once been unimaginable. Technology was advancing at an exponential rate, and with each passing day, the humans grew more confident in their ability to shape the future. They were no longer the underdogs. They were beginning to emerge as a force that would reshape the very fabric of galactic history. The Council had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to evolve, and to unite. Now, as they sat in their chambers, watching the reports flood in from Earth, they could no longer deny what was happening. The humans were no longer just a species struggling to survive. They were on the verge of something far greater. They had discovered a power within themselves that no one had anticipated. And this power was not just about technology. It was about the humans' ability to unite, to come together in times of crisis, and to rise above their past. As the days passed, the ripple effect of humanity's awakening spread further throughout the galaxy. Ships that had once been sent to observe Earth now returned with reports of a planet on the brink of something extraordinary. Their energy waves were not only causing a stir among the galactic powers, but were reaching out to other species who had long been silent. It was as though Earth was sending out a message that said, "We are no longer weak, we are no longer divided, and we are no longer to be ignored." In the halls of the Council, there was a growing sense of urgency. The debates became heated as members of the Council argued over what course of action to take. Some suggested that they try to reach out to the humans, to offer them guidance, but others were more cautious. They feared that humanity's newfound strength was a sign of instability, a sign that they could no longer be controlled. They wondered if the energy humanity had unlocked was the beginning of something far more dangerous than they realized. Zorath, who had long mourned the counsel of the humans' potential, now found himself in an increasingly difficult position. The more he tried to speak of the human strength, the more the Council dismissed him. They still saw humanity as a species that could be molded, a species that could be guided into the fold of galactic order. They refused to see what was clear to him, that the humans had already stepped beyond their reach. It wasn't just the energy that was growing, it was the humans themselves. They had unlocked something more than just a new technology. They had unlocked a way of thinking, a way of being that transcended their past. They had discovered unity, and in that unity, they had discovered an inner strength that was capable of changing the world. And with each passing moment, the rest of the galaxy was becoming more aware of what was happening on Earth. Zorath knew the Council was too far gone to understand. The events were moving too quickly for them to comprehend. By the time they realized the true extent of humanity's potential, it would be too late. The humans had already changed the course of history, and nothing, not even the Council, could stop them. In the end, it wasn't the technology or the energy that would define humanity. It was their ability to come together, to set aside their differences, and to rise above the challenges that had once seemed insurmountable. It was this power, this spirit, that would change the galaxy forever. and the rest of the universe would soon see that humans were no longer the species that could be overlooked. They were a force to be reckoned with, and their power was only just beginning to unfold. The council was in disarray. For the first time in generations, they felt a growing sense of fear. The galaxy, once under their control, was now shifting. It was no longer just Earth that they had to worry about. It was humanity itself. Their ability to unite, to adapt, and to create was something that even the most advanced civilizations could not deny. In the council chambers, discussions became more frantic with every passing day. The reports were consistent. Humans were advancing, not just in technology, but in unity. Zorath, who had long mourned the council, found himself at the center of it all. He had tried to make them understand, but they had ignored him. Now, as Earth continued to radiate energy that stretched across the galaxy, the truth was inescapable. Humanity was no longer the fractured, vulnerable species they had once thought them to be. They had transformed into something new, something far more capable of shaping their destiny. In every corner of the planet, there was a sense of purpose. Earth's leaders were no longer struggling to maintain control. They were working together with one mind. From the bustling cities to the quiet villages, humans had found common ground. The challenges they once faced, wars, poverty, division, had been set aside. The energy they had discovered became a symbol of their unity, a reflection of their growth as a species. What once seemed like isolated breakthroughs in laboratories now spanned the entire globe. No longer were the humans reliant on the resources that had once defined them. They had found new ways to harness the energy they had unlocked, finding applications that had never been imagined. Power, food, and even health were no longer limited by the constraints of the old world. Humanity was thriving in ways that no one could have predicted. Zorath knew that the rest of the galaxy was watching. There was no denying the impact of what was happening on Earth. The ripple effect of humanity's progress was reaching further and further, drawing the attention of neighboring civilizations. What had started as a small spark on Earth had now become a beacon of possibility for others. They could see what the humans had achieved, and were beginning to wonder if their own civilizations could do the same. In the council chambers, the voices grew louder. Some argued that the time had come for them to act, that they should extend an olive branch to the humans before it was too late. Others, however, believed that humanity's newfound power could be dangerous. They were afraid that the humans might try to impose their will on the galaxy, that they would spread their energy and influence to others who were not yet ready for it. But Zorath could see something the council could not. The humans were not a threat. They were a challenge to the status quo. They had learned to overcome their own flaws and divisions, and in doing so, they had discovered something that no other species had: the power of true cooperation. It wasn't just their technology that made them formidable. It was their ability to work together toward a common goal. They had learned that their strength was not in their individual achievements, but in their collective will. As the council continued to debate, Zorath reflected on what he had witnessed on Earth. He remembered the stories of their history, how they had struggled, how they had fought among themselves, and how they had nearly destroyed their own world. But now, all of that seemed like a distant memory. What had once been a species defined by conflict was now united in a shared purpose. They had found a way to transcend their past, to create something better. Zorath could see that the humans had not just unlocked a new energy source. They had unlocked a new way of thinking. They had learned to let go of their old ways of conflict, their need to control everything, and instead had embraced a more harmonious approach. It was this harmony that was driving their progress, and that made them so different from the other species in the galaxy. They were not bound by the same limitations that others were. With each passing day, humanity's influence spread further. What had once been a small force, confined to their home world, was now reaching out to the stars. The humans were sending their energy, their ideas, and their cooperation into the galaxy, and they were being met with curiosity. Some saw them as a beacon of hope, others as a potential threat. But one thing was certain: no one could ignore the humans any longer. The galaxy, once ruled by the established powers, was on the brink of change. The humans had become a force that could not be dismissed. They were no longer the underdogs. They were leaders in their own right, showing the galaxy what it meant to evolve, to work together, and to rise above the conflicts that had once defined them. Zorath knew that the time for hesitation had passed. The humans had reached the point where they could no longer be ignored. The galaxy was changing, and the Council had to decide whether to embrace this new era or to resist it. But deep down, Zorath knew that no matter what the Council chose, the future was no longer in their hands. The power had shifted, and it was now in the hands of humanity. As Zorath stood before the Council, his mind was made up. The time for warnings had passed. The humans had risen, and nothing could stop them now. They had unlocked their potential. And with it, they were ready to reshape the future of the galaxy. It was not through conquest or war, but through unity and shared purpose that humanity would leave its mark on the universe. And no one, not even the most powerful council in the galaxy, could prevent them from achieving their destiny.